Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I'm on chess.com and going to do another game review from a friend of mine on the site. This was a standard game, time control, 15 minutes with a 10-second increment. On the white end, we had a player of approximate rating 2000 and on the black end 1900. So let's jump right into this one and see what we can take away from it. This game was just under 30 moves, so not too lengthy a game, but some points to certainly touch on in this one. So d4, e6, knight f3, d5, and knight to d2. This, of course, is not a bad move, but I kind of identify this move as one that, well, white really can't hope for an advantage playing with the white pieces if this move is played. It's kind of, it's too quick to already obstruct the bishop. Like, if I'm playing on the black end and I see this move, I'd like to just share some of the thoughts that I would have when I see such a move. For one, I'd be saying to myself, well, I don't have to worry about the bishop playing to f4 and g5, that's quite clear now. If that is to happen, he, of course, will need to move again. An additional tempo will be needed before I have any worry of the bishop coming out along this diagonal. So that's one thing. The knight is obstructing the bishop, the short summary. Additionally, I'm not quite sure where this knight's next move will be. He's kind of boxed out due to the pawn on d5. No great forward moves to e4, c4. And if we consider the b3 square, well, this isn't such a happy square either. It always runs into these rook pawn advances, knights on these squares. The rook pawns like to push the knights around. So it's really, I really don't see where that next great square will be for this knight on d2. And sure enough, in this game, we get as far as move 20, like really the tail end of the game. And this knight is still there on d2. So I think it's too early to do that. Again, it's not bad. Maybe white has it in their mind that they're going with a system that they're just really familiar with, and they wanted to go with that, and that's fine, of course. But just wanted to speak objectively to this move, knight to d2, and how it kind of, you lose your right in a way as white to fight for some advantage. This really isn't going to be a way to show the advantage of the first move, playing the white pieces. A better move, quite natural, of course, will be a c4 strike, forming a duo, striking at the center, maybe deploying the bishop, maybe going for g3, just throwing some alternatives out there. So knight d2 it is, knight f6. There will be c5. This is quite natural, and it does hit next. And it's important to not just think that these moves are interchangeable. We want to take into account what this knight on d2 is in fact doing. It's supporting an e4 advance. So knight f3, c5, well, we're going to go with the one that prevents this freeing move e4. So knight f6 it is. And g3, c5 hits. And now we have c3 reinforcing on d4. And the next move is c4, and this is one that I do not like. This is something I touched on in the last game review from this series, where I pointed out when there's tension between pawns like this, the side who owns the pawn with the more possibilities should maintain the tension. So, of these two pawns, which of these two has more options? It's black. Black can move. Black could capture. White, on the other hand, can only capture. It's nice to maintain those possibilities, and black should do that. Just keep the pawn sitting, not declare its intentions so quickly. A better move instead of c4 is b6, and there's a couple ideas in mind with this. For one, it's placing black in a position to meet d takes c, should that occur, with b takes c, and black maintains a nice presence in the center, nice control over d4, and we could already start to think about as black pushing in the center, where there is this 2-to-1 majority. The pawn will be here on c5 to help out with this central advance. Additionally, the b6 advance is anticipating what it is white looks to do pawn break wise. Now after the after c5 and the move c3, the c3 pawn is clearly in a defensive posture. That is his role on c3, to meet one day c takes d with c takes d. Where is white going to get their pawn break in? This is the only way I could see that happening is with the move e4. And black can already take steps to make this break in the center, the e4 break, that much more difficult to get in. So, two ideas in mind with b6. Reinforce c5 meets d takes c with b takes c, and also simply deploy the bishop on the main diagonal. Oppose white's soon-to-be fianchettoed bishop. And this would, of course, be one day from now, having a light square bishop exchange would be favorable to black. When you're going with these type of kingside fianchettos, you're really placing a great value now on that minor piece. These fianchettoed bishops, the kingside fianchetto bishop, he's now extremely important for your king position, watching over the weakened squares that you create with g3. So this would really be a much better idea to keep the tension. In other words, shoot for b6. We can have bishop g2, bishop to b7, castle here, and notice with the bishop on b7 there are now three pieces that are making this particular break that much more difficult to get in. Okay, well, in the game we had c4, some natural stuff to follow. Bishop g2, bishop e7. He has a couple options, and I believe e7 is best. One thing as white, this knight is really going to want to play to e5 for a couple of reasons. One, it simply improves the knight's position. It's a central square. It's a nice post. It has support. And the other idea, well, it unmasks the bishop. The bishop now has, or would have, some direct influence in the position. Anticipating this idea of knight e5 and improving the knight position and unleashing the bishop, one might think, well, maybe I could take some steps to prevent the knight from playing here. Maybe a quick bishop d6 and knight to d7 and secure that e5 square before the knight even gets there. One of the downsides with this, I don't know if this is best, but I just want to, I would like to draw this to your attention, and that is black quite possibly runs the risk of a fork when e4 hits. Now all of a sudden, if this pawn on e4 is maintained, there's now the threat of e5, and white will be winning material. And also, another thing is, even if that does not happen, let's say e4 is actually played right now, after a move like takes, there is a move, like knight to g5, and this pawn will be won back. It's hit 3 times, it's only defended once, and when it's captured, notice it comes now with tempo against the bishop. So these are just a couple reasons I'm pointing out here for why the bishop is maybe not so well placed on d6 when compared to e7. Okay, we do have bishop e7, castles, knight c6, e4 hits. This can be played right away because of these ideas of the knight moving out of the way with then 3 pieces hitting. So if this stuff happens, well, in fact, knight g5 can't be played right now because of the bishop on e7 and the queen. But there's always moves like knight to d2 and c4 and e4, both unprotected and both without defense. So white will get the material back. Knight here, or even knight captures on c4, depending on which one black wants to give up. Okay, so we didn't have that capture. E4 is on board. Black castles. Rook e1, very natural and good. Rook b8. This is preparing b5 and b4 to break at c3, create a more accessible target, one might say. If the b pawns are exchanged, if one day this guy gets here, and we have chop, chop, essentially what is happening, the b pawns are eliminated, and all of a sudden the c3 pawn is a far more accessible target. We could see something quite direct, like the queen deploying to a5, a developing move, and there you go. Some direct pressure on white's pawn structure. White has to then devote a piece to its defense, and that's a bit uncomfortable. So that's black's idea to get this rolling. One might question, why was b5 not just played right away? I'm not sure I have a great answer to that. If a4, that could be met with b4, just sidestepping that pawn exchange, not allowing this rook to come to life so easily. So maybe b5 is another move to go in for right now, but you also have to be a bit careful. That does weaken the c6 square. It weakens a light square. It weakens this diagonal, we can say, and maybe this is now a bit disruptive to black, putting pressure on the c6 knight, and ideas like this might be present where we can capture and then even think about playing b3. And there are already tricks. If I'm just to make a passing move, there are already tricks connected with taking advantage of the c6 knight with takes, and after takes there's even a move knight takes on c4. If knight takes knight, we recapture like this, and if pawn takes, well, now he's hit twice and he could be scooped up. I'm not even sure if knight takes is best, but just to highlight, that's a little tactic to be aware of. If black is going to play, if they're going to push their b pawn like this right away, they may very well be tactically vulnerable. Pressure on this diagonal. So rook b8 is, white is, let's say, making, by playing rook to b8 prior to b5, they're making the less committal move first, not weakening their pawn structure, not weakening any squares, also getting off of this diagonal. Okay, white anticipates the b5 break and plays a4. Black plays b4 anyhow, or b5 anyway, and this is maybe a bit too rushed. This idea of b5. After this exchange, so this is what happened in the game. b5 still was played. A takes b, rook takes b. Who really benefits after that exchange? I believe it is white. For one, rook has an open file. Well, both rooks are active, but this base point, b2, is not so accessible to black. How do you put further pressure on white's pawn structure? This bishop is quite well placed, still on his home square, serving a quite useful role. And I don't think that this was maybe a bit too rushed. The b5 idea here. one thing that I considered was, well, maybe you can, as black, go for a6 and then maybe b5. But I don't know that there's really much time for that, because white can hit with this move knight to e5, and this makes this b5 advance quite difficult to get in. Now there's a lot of pressure happening in the center with the bishop being released, pressure on d5, pressure on c6. I don't know that this is something we can really rely upon as black, something that we can be assured will be played. One idea that I came across from this position is, instead of this a6 idea, black could maybe say to themselves, after a4, well, how is white deficient as a result of that move? And that weakens b3, the a4 move, and weakens two squares, a3, b3 and b4, I should say. But it's really the b3 square that should come to mind, because black already has pawn support, and needs only to one day put a piece there, and it could be quite a bothersome piece. A better move, instead of b5, may very well have been b6, or an immediate move knight to a5. And if this knight ever moves, again, I'm not quite sure where exactly he's going to go. For right now, he still has a very important job of watching over the e4 pawn for as long as this tension is maintained. But the day that he moves, the moment he moves, now knight to b3 can be very bothersome to white. This was an idea by black to go in for this knight to a5 move. And after, let's say, knight here, b6, bishop here, and then eventually white's going to have to do something about this pressure against e4. If I'm just to make a passing move, I believe it's already black who starts to become better if white is not quick to do something in the center. If white is not going to resolve the tension in the center right away in this case, it may be a bit too late, because now we have the light square bishops being exchanged, and now a really strongly placed queen. And how are you dislodging that queen? Maybe you have to do stuff like this, but keep in mind what has just happened here. White has exchanged their extremely valuable light square bishop, and yeah. So it's just a different idea black can shoot for. You could kind of shift gears and say, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to go for this advance anymore. I'm going to maybe look to exploit a weakness that you have left behind with your a4 advance. I'm going to play knight to a5 and keep a close eye on b3. That said, instead of the a4 move, let's also be aware of another way we can, as white, be preventing the b5 advance. a4 is, I guess we can say, the most direct way we can see, the most direct way to eliminate a black pawn as soon as it arrives on b5. But what's another way that we can prevent this b5 advance from hitting? Well, the move we could play, if you'd like to pause the video and try and figure it out, what other way can we prevent this advance from happening on black's next turn? Again, if you'd like to pause the video, feel free to do just that. Okay, another way we can prevent b5 in this position is by playing knight to e5, putting pressure on c6. And you can't do this because you would then drop the knight. And this is a desirable move anyway. It proves the knight position as mentioned, it releases the bishop, so knight to e5 is another way that white can prevent black's idea to expand on the queen side with this b5, b4 idea. And it does not weaken the b3 square, of course. There is no longer, there won't be this idea of knight to a5 into b3. I can't help but be reminded, I think that I've actually been, I've done something like this myself on the white end. I don't know about this exact position, but I'm pretty sure I've done something like this before, maybe against a computer. I don't remember the exact game, but yeah, a move like a4, very natural. It's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to preventing what it is your opponent wants to do, a prophylactic type of idea, and you leave a gap in your position. There's something vulnerable now on your side of the board that can quite possibly be exploited. Okay, well, we had a4, and b5 hits, takes, and now knight to e5. These are good moves. I really like how White is playing. I mean, the e4 move's quite natural. White is the better side here. They got the e4 break in. Their pieces are functioning very well. This rook is a little bit clumsy, and I don't see where there's really good play for black. I mean, there's one. That move wasn't played. There's some pressure on white in that of the b2 pawn, but it is of no inconvenience to white to be defending it like this. So white is in the driver's seat. He's the one throwing punches right now. The knight is hit. We have takes, pawn recaptures, and now knight to d7. We have to be very careful of something here as white. This pawn is in our position. He is controlling both b3 and d3, and that in itself is not so much an issue. The issue is, should one day a piece arrive on one of these two squares, that's when it starts to become bothersome to us. Black is not long off from observing both of those squares. A knight on c5 right behind this pawn. He will have two excellent prospects, d3 in particular. There is not a minor piece watching over d3. There is watching over b3, but the d3 square is one where the knight is really well maximized. He has that reach of 8 possibilities, and well, he hits on that square with great effect, punching at the rook, pressure on f2, etc. So we need to, as white, things have certainly opened up here. We had a structural change after d takes e5. There's now a 4-3 majority on the king side. Already there might be ideas connected with breaking like so with e6, blasting open the position, maybe going right after the king. These things should really be coming to mind. The structural change, the 4 versus 3 majority on the king side, this idea of maybe the black king being a bit more vulnerable, because after this capture, what are we really doing? We're chasing the number one defender of black's king side away. He's no longer on f6. He's going elsewhere. He's moving away from the king side. So things like this should at least be considered, is what I'm getting at. I'm not saying that's the exact direction the game is going to go or did go, but to at least be giving some consideration to the changes that occurred with the structure. In this position, we had white play next rook takes a, and white maintains an advantage. If you look at this move here, it still holds as an advantage for white, but not so much of an advantage. And the reason for that is because this knight is soon to pounce on these squares here, knight c5 and then into d3. Rook takes a, queen b6 was played, the rook dropped back, and now here comes knight c5, and this is very awkward for white. I think it has it around like a 0.2 or 3 advantage for white, but there's certainly a lot of pressure. There's certainly a lot of pressure that black is going to have now. This knight jumping into d3. Maybe white, I don't know, maybe there was a little bit of a miscalculation at this point. Maybe white did not see that black can in fact play knight to c5, thinking that this pawn can be captured as an example after this move here. If white can get away with takes here, things would be really good because we also have knight takes here as a follow-up. The problem here is after knight d3, the rook is attacking the bishop. Maybe white saw this, but thought they could take on c4, hit the queen, and on the next move going to take the knight, and there's no time to take the rook. Don't know that happened, of course, but I don't know if that type of miscalculation happened, of course, but the additional problem with knight d3 is not only is the bishop hit and the rook, but more importantly, we have the queen and knight converging on f2. So there is absolutely no time for a move like knight c4 because of queen takes f2, and well, there goes your rook. So something else should be done in this position instead of grabbing the pawn. And what should that be? If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, see what you would do in this position other than capture the pawn on a7, which is not best. What do you think the top move would be in this position? What would you come up with as white? Okay, the best move in this position is b4. What is that doing? It's taking away a super valuable square from the knight. If he can't get to c5, he's not getting to d3 or b3. This is a really strong move. And what is black to do? They are still, they could still lose the a7 pawn for one. If they're capturing en passant, we have knight takes, and there's no worry of a knight arriving on d3 anymore. Maybe the bishop gets here. We have some coordination or the help of a minor piece, but that's going to take a lot more work by black to really have an annoying piece arrive on d3 when compared to having just a one-point piece fulfill that role of watching over the d3 square. So if we do have this exchange of black c pawn, white's b pawn, white is going to really be in the driver's seat here. For one, now this pawn can drop at any moment. This knight, who was not so well placed on d2, all of a sudden starts to become an enormous piece. He'll position up in the center. He does so with tempo. He facilitates an excellent pawn break with e6. Just really, really great things are now happening for white. Starting off with this b4 move, if we do have the capture, white is really, without question, going to be in the driver's seat. Just a little bit of patience was required at this point by white to factor in the great strength, the great, how do you say, really the great position black can obtain for their knight on the d3 square. If white squashes that idea, then all these this threat is then back on. Black still has that to worry about. So it's kind of like address the one idea black has in the position, and then you could still have all your trumps. You could have all your positives, and they start to become that much more prominent. So b4 would have been far better. Capture en passant would not be best. So a better move for black is, instead of capturing in this position, to play a5, and we can, as a follow-up, play a4. The idea with a5 is to try and grant access to the c5 square for the knight, try and force b takes a, but white always has something here. After queen a4, there's queen b6, and now this knight could finally reposition. The bishop is free. A takes b can be met with knight d4. The rook is hit, doesn't have very many options. Rook here, now we can take, the rook returns, and notice how all these pieces are really falling on excellent squares for white. Opposite the queen, excellent pawn break. Bishop still on back rank. Minor pieces only on the second rank. Great space advantage here. And there's no time to take on b4 either. Bishop takes, runs into pins, and queen takes runs into moves like knight to c6, and this is going to be big trouble for black. Black is having to actually give up the exchange from this position because the queen and bishop have pressure on it. Queen takes queen, there's first the in-between shot, and only then the recapture. So my main point here is that white should not be so quick to go and grab that pawn and address this idea of knight c5 into d3. In the game, it was rook takes a, queen b6, rook a1, knight c5, bishop f1. Again, you can't take here because of knight d3, f2, and then knight takes rook. So it's bishop f1, bishop f5, and now b4. So this is the last main, well, no, not the last main point in the game, but this b4 move, sure enough, does happen in the game. It's not as well timed now to play b4, because the knight could just jump right in. That is not best in this particular case, but after this b4 move, black plays knight into d3, but this is not best. The knight is, well, white positioned their bishop on f1 to take out a knight should it arrive on d3, and it's really the knight. If there is one piece white does not have to want to work around, it's the knight on d3, and that can immediately be eliminated and was eliminated in the game. After knight d3, bishop takes, knight f3, white is in the driver's seat. They're still the better side here. They have an excellent structure. They're going to have a beautiful square on d4 for either a knight or bishop. And the bishop on d3, he's not really... he's deep in white's position, but he's not so great an inconvenience. There's not really a way to connect. There's not really a way that black can coordinate their pieces in a way where they show that their bishop on d3 really has a great impact on the position. There's not, you can't really tie another piece in with this bishop on d3. It's very important that black recognizes this, as tempting as it is to just react to b4 by playing knight c5. White still has a great advantage here after knight f3. With the knight coming into d4, it's really, really good for team white. And again, a move like that is hitting with tempo. Bishop to e3, it's hitting with tempo. A better move here, I didn't mean to go all the way back. A better move in this position after b4 is to actually take en passant. And I believe black didn't give this, well, I don't know that they didn't give it so much consideration, but maybe they discarded this at the end of the day because why exactly? Well, you're giving up the exchange, but there is certainly great compensation that black has for this. For one, if you're going to take the rook, if you're going to invest your light square bishop, he's your number one guy. Giving up your light square bishop, the things that are immediately popping up in my mind are, okay, let's look at the light squares around your king now. h3, f3. Let's also look at the bishop on f5. Black still has a light square bishop. We could see stuff like this. Bishop to h3, the queen one day trying to arrive on the g2 square for mate. There's a lot of light square weaknesses, and coupled with the light square weaknesses is a very dangerous passed pawn who's only a couple steps away. And black already has support for that promotion square. So this would have been the direction to go in. The computer holds it as equal, but I kind of, if I had to pick one side or the other, I'm leaning more towards black. I would much rather be black in this position. I mean, there's some really good squares. If we observe the light squares here, d3, e4, c2, great jumping points for the pieces. And this pawn with such depth like this in the weaknesses around the white king position, it's a bit scary, to say the least. So this is what black should have gone for, but they needed to recognize that this was not leading to anything. It's really not going to be a bothersome piece here, this bishop on d3. If a knight could have been maintained on d3, it's a much different story. b4 really does put a great question to the knight right away. It's important that this question is thrown to the knight. Given time, as an example, let's just say white, I don't know, just to make a passing move, if h3 is played, one idea that black can go forward with is, well, hey, let's have a light square bishop exchange. After bishop takes, well, now this is a much, much different story. A knight on d3 is a great, great bother. Okay. We had b4. The knight went to d3. Takes, knight f3. f6. It's difficult to suggest something for black here. White is the better side. They're really going to find excellent places for their pieces, excellent positions for their pieces, the minor pieces. After f6, we do have bishop e3, development with tempo, and now knight d4 hitting the rook. After f6 was played, a move that should have been considered, maybe it was, e6. You know, e6 is a pass pawn, and I kind of view e6 as really like it's a connected pass pawn. The knight on d4, you know, excellent support. You can't really dislodge the knight on d4. The bishop e3 idea, knight to d4, it's really, really strong. Another reason you would maybe want to go for the e6 advance is to say, is to be assured that the f-file does not get ripped open. You know, we don't want maybe this rook coming to life and then black all of a sudden converging on f2. So these are just trying to throw out some additional reasons as to why, some additional reasons for why you may want to go forward with a move like e6, avoiding this exchange, avoiding the opening up of the f-file. Okay, well, e6 wasn't played in this position. Instead, bishop e3, which is still good, still strong move. Queen b8, knight to d4, hitting the rook. The rook runs away. And, yeah, this is still another moment to do this. But, okay, knight d4 is still strong. Rook to b6. As black, I would give some strong consideration at this point to giving up the exchange again. It's still, white's going to be the better side, but I think this is what you have to shoot for as black here. Take on e4 and try to get these guys rolling somehow after knight takes, queen takes. It's difficult to do because of the great activity white would have, the rook coming to the 7th, the queen coming out here, and white is really quick to get both rooks into the mix. But I think it's maybe black's best chance to kind of mix things up at this point. But after knight d4, we had rook to b6, and still e6 should be played here. And white is really doing well. Pass pawn, and it's just a difficult position. How do you improve as black? I don't really see how you do that. And how do you eventually track down this pass pawn? Just not seeing it. We had, unfortunately, wrong idea at this point for white. They played really well up to this point, just some small suggestions really for the most part, but they started to go astray here with this next move, knight to e2, just running in reverse to unleash an attack on the rook. It's probably not worth it to do that. In such an open position, I'm really that much more focused on these forward moves and to, let's say, demote the knight to the 2nd rank in order to throw this punch at the rook is probably not a good idea. Black from this point responded well after the knight e2 move. Black said, okay, you know what, at this point I am going to give up the exchange. F takes e. And now a bit of a mysterious move to me, this rook to a8 move. Yeah, not taking the exchange. I'm not sure why you don't go straight in for that. Maybe they had second thoughts about it because now there's pressure against f2, but we had this little deflection type of idea with rook to a8 played in the game. Rook takes, so it was basically a pawn was given up for not so much. You know, we just had the rooks being exchanged. Queen takes rook, bishop takes rook. No exchange is won now. Black improves from this point. Black is now all of a sudden in the driver's seat. Bishop e3, d4 hits, and things are really rolling for Team Black now. This central pawn push, an excellent queen. The light squares start. The bishop starts to have a great influence all of a sudden because of this this break in the center, and maybe a possibility to get the c pawn rolling. The bishop would help out with that pawn's advance, but it's really Black from this point who's throwing the punches. d4. If takes, there's always this as a possibility, as an in-between move, hitting the rook. As a reply, it was bishop d2, and after queen to f3, White already threw in the towel just like that. There's not going to be a good defense against the f2 pawn. Queen takes f2 is the threat. Rook here is dropping the knight, dropping much more than the knight. So it was a really quick turnaround just then. For the longest time, it was White who was in the driver's seat, but in some critical moments, there were some definite ways to improve, for sure. The b4 move did hit, sure enough, in this game, but playing it a little bit sooner right here, instead of going with the pawn move, squashing that one idea that Black had of playing into c5, playing b4 first, and things, I believe, would have been far smoother here for Team White. So just as a quick recap, touching on the points again, that knight d2 move maybe a bit too soon. Releasing the tension in the center instead better is b6, bishop b7, anticipating this idea of an e4 break. And also the placement of the bishop. If you're on d6, you're vulnerable to maybe a fork. You're vulnerable to one day a knight playing here and hitting your bishop with tempo. And these ideas that Black could kind of maybe shift gears after a4. Maybe Black can say, well, you know what, okay, I'm not going to play b4, I'm going to try to take advantage of the weakness you created by playing a4. Knight a5 with b6, bishop b7 is another idea Black can shoot for. And, well, as we saw already a couple times, this idea of b4. It did hit in the game, but maybe a little bit too late. And, yeah, the last moment here for Black, they really do have to go in for this exchange and then try to play against these light square weaknesses against the king, and have this pawn let this pawn have a say, since he is now passed on the b file. So anyhow, that's pretty much everything I think I wanted to say with this one. So as usual, feel free to leave any feedback in the comments section below to this video. As usual, I hope you got something out of it, and I will catch you in the next one. So that's all for now. Take care. Bye.